Everything discussed in this video is drawn from historical sources and records. These ideas are examined for context, not presented as personal beliefs. Katherine Tai, Biden's US trade representative, stands there at a naturalization ceremony, beaming like a proud auntie at a baptism, and solemnly declares, "Immigrants built this country. They laid the foundations of our roads and railways." Silicon Valley's billionaire oddball Sam Altman nods sagely from his carbon-spewing private jet and proclaims, "We know that immigrants built this country." Meanwhile, the usual NGO choir, Human Rights Campaign, SEIU California, Southern Poverty Law Center, belt out their greatest hits in perfect unison. Black people built this country, immigrants built this country, and the absolute showstopper, slaves literally built this country. Heartwarming, tear-jerking. It's also complete and utter crap, because when you actually bother to look at who was out there swinging the pick, drowning in the ditches, getting blown to bits in the tunnels, and coughing their lungs out in the mines, and crucially, who stumped up the cash in the first place, the pretty little sermon collapses faster than a Hollywood marriage. Take the railroads. In 1847, Scientific American reported that the Central Railroad of Michigan employs thousands of laborers, and on the New York and Erie Railroad, more than 3,000 men were at work, and that the greatest energy and enterprise is now displayed in the construction of these roads. Translation: vast, expendable armies of poor Irish, Scots, Germans, and other Europeans, hired because they were dirt cheap and worked until they dropped. Oscar Handlin recorded that Boston's Irish newspapers, especially the Boston Pilot, could carry ads for more than 2,000 men in a single issue, all to be scattered across the continent to dig, blast, haul, and die. Handlin notes that railroading meant riotous camp life and long absences from women, family, and friends, which is polite historian code for booze-soaked, cholera-infested death camps where you croaked at 30 and the foreman pocketed your last paycheck. William I. Thomas and Florian Znaniecki's The Polish Peasant in Europe and America shows peasants deliberately heading to mines on railroads and in steel works, picking the most back-breaking, lung-blackening jobs because it paid the quickest. One Polish lad in South Chicago writes home that he's doing 8 hours a day with Polish carpenters at 35 cents an hour and hopes to land factory or car shop work when the outdoor season ends. Millions of poor white Europeans trading their bodies for a paycheck. Farley Grubb's work on German immigration and servitude explains the nature and difficulties of the recruitment and shipping process, the sardine tin crowding, voyage mortality, post-voyage mortality. Basically a conveyor belt of broke, desperate Europeans delivered half dead to be used as human diesel for canals, mines, farms, and tracks. And let's not forget the wider Anglo world. Peter Holmes's Family Histories records families enduring 3-month sailings to reach what the Colonial Office called native bush and a pumice wasteland, barren, unoccupied, and unfarmed. Survival meant freezing on remote mining coasts in shacks made of hope and corrugated iron, cut off from civilization, eating turnips and regret. Between 1850 and 1930, America imported over 14 million foreign-born labourers, nearly all of them white, nearly all from Britain and Europe. In 1910 alone, nearly 12 million foreign-born whites were knocking about the place, with 87% of them born in Europe. At the turn of the century, 14% of the entire US population was foreign-born, overwhelmingly European. That was the actual workforce, laying the tracks, digging the canals, heaving the steel, and turning swamps into cities. Not some photogenic little minority cameo. For decades, the literal backbone of America's physical build was European labour. Poor, white, expendable, and apparently now invisible because they don't fit the approved victim bingo card. And then comes the unspoken twist the lefties always forget to mention: who actually paid for it all. The Transcontinental Railroad wasn't crowdfunded by heroic Chinese track gangs holding a bake sale. It was bankrolled and bossed by men like Leland Stanford, Collis Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker on the Central Pacific side, Thomas Durant, Oakes, and Oliver Ames, and their banking houses on the Union Pacific side. They leaned on federal land grants and bonds voted through by a white political class, flogged the land to largely European settlers, and turned the cash into more steel and sleepers. Cornelius Vanderbilt, James J. Hill, Jay Gould, J.P. Morgan. The entire railway age is basically a Christmas card list of European American capital. So even if you charitably swallowed every single exaggerated cherry-picked claim about which approved minority group swung which sacred hammer, the brutal reality still wouldn't budge an inch. The Wild West diversity myth, where 669 cowboys had exactly 2 token black mates. Why do the myth makers always open with the same smug little conjuring trick? The new Western history crowd say that the West wasn't a frontier at all, just a convenient stage for race, class, gender, and environment. St. Patricia Limerick swoons that the West was the most culturally diverse region in America. Richard White, not to be out-virtued, insists multiculturalism replaces the frontier. Its beautiful, shimmering, glamours, virtue-signalling ideology, right up until you open an actual census book, glance at a ranch payroll, or read one of the 100 polite little notices that said, "No Chinese allowed," nailed to every mining camp saloon. Because the moment you step into the real West, the one with the mud, actual people in it, the rainbow unicorn farts vanish faster than a politician's promise, and you're left staring at a whole lot of sunburnt white lads. The frontier wasn't a touchy-feely social experiment run by diversity officers. It was a pressure cooker where settlers honestly believed they were bringing civilization while stamping out savagery. That's not a hate crime, buddy. That's just what they wrote in their diaries while loading the rifles. The West was built on raw, unapologetic force. Texas was snatched in a war. The Great Plains were cleared by campaigns that steamrolled native nations with technology, organization, and sheer numbers. And once the buffalo were turned into tongue sandwiches, and once the Indians living there had been defeated and forced onto reservations, the land wasn't handed out as a multicultural commune with dreamcatcher workshops. It was opened up for one culture, guess which one, to move in, build, and plant stuff. For the groups that modern writers love to Photoshop into every Hollywood saloon scene, the frontier was a meat grinder with a strict racial seating chart. Blacks and Chinese were, as one historian explains, placed into an ugly contest for the bottom of the status hierarchy, with the victory depending a great deal on how public officials defined and bounded the group. Then come the Chinese expulsions. 439 documented attempts between 1885 and 1887 alone. Bombings, burnings, lynchings, and delightful little forced marches in the pouring rain. In Tacoma, the entire Chinese community was frog-marched out of town while their homes went up in flames behind them. Call that a multicultural West one more time. I double dare you. You can't spell diversity paradise while you're busy ethnically cleansing entire neighborhoods with torches and pitchforks. Even the broader American identity laughs in the face of the multicultural thesis. The country wasn't founded as some glorious Benetton advert of world peoples. As Patrick N. Allett puts it, in The American West, history, myth, and legacy. The great mass of the early colonists were English with large numbers from Scotland and Ireland. This is why the West looked the way it did. It was Anglo-settler society on horseback, not a melting pot where everyone swapped recipes and held hands. If you still need convincing, hop the border. The Alberta frontier wasn't multicultural either. It was overwhelmingly Anglo, exactly like its American cousin. To quote the Inconvenience census, the census also gave an interesting snapshot of the Alberta ranching frontier. 80% came from Eastern Canada or Britain, 17% were American. The frontier was overwhelmingly Anglo-Canadian or British. There you go, comrades. 97% white Anglo stock, not a didgeridoo player, Tibetan monk, or diversity consultant in sight. And now, right at the end, comes the knockout punch that sends the whole fairy tale crashing through the saloon floor. Pull the actual demographic records. In the northern and plains ranching states, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, the Dakotas, cowboy-age men were 90 to 98% white. Blacks clocked in at a majestic 0 to 3%. Mexicans were basically mythical creatures outside South Texas. Chinese cowboys, 0, nada. Not even a statistical rounding error. Open Wyoming's 1880 census, and behold, 669 cowboys, only 2 black. Even the woke history books have to mumble. Well, that's surprisingly small. Then hop the border, Canadian ranching country, 80% Anglo, 17% American, and the rest, presumably the camp cook's dog. All of it, the expulsions, the racial pecking order, the conquest mindset, the Anglo-Celtic roots, and finally this demographic sledgehammer, paints one crystal clear picture that isn't diverse in the slightest. The West wasn't a multicultural paradise. It wasn't even built with that intention. It was a white settler country, full stop.